So I'm Nick Foley, and this is Devin Balkind. Did I say that right?
Sure.
Okay.
Balkind,
Okay.
whatever.
And we actually met at the Bitcoin conference last weekend, and I actually bought a piece of silver from you for Bitcoin. I have it right here
Nice.
from my Bitcoin mint.
Yep.
Pretty
It's my
cool. Anyway,
first
I like it.
conference. Yeah. The
And
website
another.
should be up in the next 2 weeks.
What's that?
The website should be up in the next 2 weeks.
Okay. Excellent. And one of the other things that you were talking about was open source machinery or open source farm tools. And it's the very first time that I had ever heard about it. So, I did a little research. I have some questions for you. I guess this is mainly for the benefit of the people on YouTube that are watching this. But so, just I guess in a nutshell, what is open source machinery or open source tools?
The term that's kind of been being used is open hardware or open source hardware, and it's basically takes the concept of open source software where code is released, in open source software, the code is accessible to anyone who wants to use it. They have the right to use it. It's in a format that they can modify, that they can improve upon, that they can share with their community, and they can make money deploying if they so choose. So in that same way, open source hardware is basically the designs for how to build something in the physical world, the procedure, so like kind of the actual how-to guide, the step-by-step guide to how to build something, the ingredient list, the bill of sale, so like all of the items that you would need to purchase to build this thing, and then documentation and support for people and community for people who want to build stuff. So, from kind of the simplest idea of open source hardware, or open hardware is this 3D printer experience, and in the 3D printer experience, basically, if you have a 3D printer, you're downloading a file, and then you're putting in some type of substrate, some type of material that's going to be melted by a nozzle and then placed into kind of a three-dimensional. It's going to be printed on dot by dot into like a matrix, and it slowly rises up.
And
So like that, yeah.
yeah, and that astounds me. I mean, I heard of the 3D printer for the first time a few months ago, and it kind of blew my mind. What are the? I mean, how exactly does it work? You put in some kind of synthetic material. I mean, what are the
It's so simple. It's funny. I mean, it's basically in the same way that an inkjet printer squeezes out. I mean, puts a piece of ink down on a piece, on paper.
Uh-huh.
But that happens all in one dimension. So you have this piece of paper, and these little ink dots being placed, and the paper goes down. A 3D printer is basically the exact same premise, except instead of ink, it's some type of material that can be built and can be layered on top of itself and build a 3D structure.
So
And
literally, I could email you a tool or the shape of a tool, like three-dimensional, and you could actually create that tool.
I just
automatically on the printer.
Yeah, I just click print, and so the challenge becomes, how can I make, so often, there are a few different approaches to 3D printer designs. Some of them, the bottom tray where things are being printed moves.
Mm-hmm.
Other ones, the nozzle moves. But ultimately, everything's going to move. But people are printing sushi, so you could put sushi rice, and sushi materials into a nozzle and then have it print out, print like designs.
Really?
People are printing, yeah.
Wow.
People are printing, plastic is kind of the most popular one. That's just, a little bit of heat, you have a plastic coil, a little bit of heat melts the plastic and it drops it down. But there's really no limit. People are using cells. So they're printing out organs already. There's a TED Talk where the guy prints out like a kidney on stage or something. So like people,
not
3D printer
functioning
technology
yet, though.
is really crazy. But you combine 3D printer technology with like CNC machines, which enable you to do, which are basically computer-controlled arms for milling or lathing, and you really get to see kind of what a fully automated process for building physical materials are. But we're very much in the early stages. In the open, we all are, but the open source community kind of has its own version of all of these technologies, and that's where I think that's kind of the primary point of the open source movement, the Free Libre open source movement, which is that there is this whole ecology of tools, software tools, foundationally like Linux and Apache, hardware tools that run the software that can then do like awesome things like 3D printers, but also Arduino microcontrollers can people have drones that run off of this single Arduino chip, which is like a $30 microprocessor that is a microcontroller that's the designs are released on the internet so that lots of manufacturers are making them. It's not particularly sophisticated in terms of it's not like one of these Intel chips that got billions and billions of transistors in a grain of sand size. It's
because it doesn't need to be that
it's
complicated,
printable.
right?
Like you can actually make them. People can make them with chip printers. So there is this whole alternative technology stack that's developing, this whole ecology of tools that support each other in the open source environment that are creating different possibilities, technical possibilities, and that to me is really exciting. And Bitcoin certainly qualifies, because if one wanted to live only using open source technology, then you'd be left with silver, gold, bitcoins, different user point schemes built on Drupal systems or whatever. But but that life is becoming more and more possible, more and more accessible, and that's the life that I want to live. And a lot of the people I know who are in both like kind of the Liberty community and the open source community want to live the life where I want to own and understand and have the rights to all the technology that I use. I don't want to be running any systems that that I can't look into. That I can't look behind look under the hood and see like what's taking place in them.
So a lot of the things in the movement, one of the ideology is about self-sufficiency, basically, because right now this world that has been created is basically your food travels 2,000 miles on average before it hits your plate, and
and it's irradiated, and like
exactly.
you don't even have the right to know a lot of the time where your food comes from. I mean, this is in my world, and this comes back to Bitcoin also, but it's really a battle between proprietary and open. A battle between like, can I look inside? Like, can I really understand? Like, is this information made accessible? And if the answer is no, then I'm completely disempowered from the process. So food's really exciting, and it's really why I get excited about hardware, because software, it's easy to look at Linux and say, yeah, that's what super users use, or like, yeah, that's, whatever, it's software, it's a computer, computers are computers, who cares? But when we start talking about tractors and cars and the things that people buy, like the things that people need, and that they're currently buying from manufacturers in Asia, or don't know where their stuff's coming from, we get to see a change in the material environment, and nothing is more important in the material environment than food. So the intersection of the local ag community and the hacker community is super, super exciting to me. And it's funny because the more I deal with both communities, the more I realize the similarities. They use different tools, but they have the same approach to they want to be not just self-sufficient. They want to have resilient communities. They want to know the people who made the tools that they use, and they want to have like an authentic experience that isn't mediated by some type of branded corporate like existence.
And you could also say that's whether it be corporate or whether it be government, it's a centralized authority.
Yeah,
that's basically
definitely. I mean, that's where the liberty
dictating and controlling every aspect of major parts of our lives that were never meant to be controlled, and would probably be a lot better off if they weren't controlled.
Yeah, I mean that's where all these people, this massive intersection takes place, is between all of the people who are like, wait a second, we have all of this. We have all these resources, and whether those resources are soil and sun, or they're like Linux systems, or it's kind of a public who is becoming more accessible through social media. We have the tools and the resources we need to really do a better job in a distributed, build a distributed society that's more effective than our highly centralized one right now. And at some point, we're gonna start doing it. I mean, people are doing it. People are working on it right now. But at some point, that idea is going to hit the mainstream mind, and people are going to be like, yeah, like, well, why don't I have more power over my local environment?
Yeah, I mean, the way that I see Bitcoin is it's kind of a dissolution of power. I mean, you have right now all the power of printing money, the power of distributing money, the power to enforce who uses that money and how and where. That's all controlled by a private central bank, which is protected by the long arm of government, for sure. And
it's super proprietary.
When you're using Bitcoin, you're basically trying to opt out of that centralized system and move to a more decentralized system where if I want to pay you $1, I don't have to go through a PayPal, and I don't have to go through the medium of the U.S. dollar, which is obviously it's controlled by the central banks. It's backed by
controlled
debt.
Badly.
Exactly.
Badly controlled too. I mean, I think that a year ago, 2 years ago, the idea, Bitcoin and the Federal Reserve Bank and Ron Paul and all this stuff. A lot of people thought it sounded crazy.
It's crazy, right? It was just
crazy
totally
stuff that doesn't
beyond
make any
mainstream.
sense.
Now you talk to anybody and they've at least heard about it, which is a good thing.
Oh yeah, the downgrade really changed a lot in terms of people's conceptions, definitely in New York, and I'm sure just around, because it's, we all have to recognize that the world is quite large, that, the United States played a very big role in the development of, a global culture and like globalization and all that stuff. But, we don't get to call all the shots anymore. We're 350 million people. There's over 6 billion, almost 7 billion people in the world. So there's an inevitable realization that, that we can't just inflict, we can, that there are natural limits.
I think there's a realization among a lot of people that there are controllers in the first place, because I think people have been asleep to the fact that there are controllers, and they think that they do run their lives, and they look around and they see a fairly peaceful world in their own community, but what they don't see is the invisible gun, if you will. I mean, the invisible force and threat of violence by governments, which is constantly in the background of everything we do.
Yeah,
from walking down the street, driving a car, purchasing items at the grocery store. All of these things are so heavily regulated by governments that it's just a miracle that people didn't see it a long time ago. But like as you said, I think a lot more people are just now realizing that there's something above them trying to control them, and a lot of people are once they discover that, they immediately are looking for solutions to those kind of problems, which is totally natural for humans. And
and I'm also old, and that's how things were back before.
Say that again. Sorry.
That's how things were. Like, this isn't new. Like, people remember. Like, there's a lot of the old religious material, a lot of old writings. Like, people knew that war was theft. Like, to say to someone in the 1800s, war is theft, they'd be like, yeah, duh. Like, yes, war. If the leaders over there are trying to send people over here to war, and we're not being invaded, like, clearly there's theft taking place. That's what the process is. War is a racket. That should have been, why wasn't that published in the mainstream media, before the war in Iraq? And it lays out in really simple language that war is a racket. This is why it's a racket. It's a racket because businesses go to the government and they sell the government all this crap that they don't need and that they're not going to use.
It's funny. I went to public school, and I was never taught that. It's really strange. I was never taught that war was a bad thing. I was taught about the history of World War II and about how great and noble the United States was for stopping the war, and basically the wars after World War II, and we never really learned about in high school, and it was implied that they were just as noble, just as great as World War II. We were just as justified in getting in there. Like,
Well, who even and then it's who writes the history for World War II and World War One,
yeah,
and and
yeah, exactly,
it's really
exactly.
there. I don't think people recognize the power of television and like video screens. Like we don't recognize that we've had like a few generations now that have just been their entire perceptions of reality have been dominated by what they've seen on screens and not through the experiences that they have in the
Well,
actual world.
and
It's
again, that goes back
it's
to
great.
centralization
Yeah.
because I mean when television's first invented you had just a handful of television stations. I mean, and now you can turn on a cable station and you have hundreds of channels, but still it's still controlled by a central authority. And what I
Amazingly,
think is
so
great about the
thoroughly.
internet and YouTube is that people are able to watch basically anything they want at any time. It's not controlled by a central media organization. The media organization doesn't decide what you're watching. You decide what you're watching, and you decide how long you watch. You can decide if you want to watch ads or not. You know what I mean? So I think a lot more people are gravitating away from that central control, not just being aware of the monetary situation and things like that, but also with the flow of information. And I think that what you're talking about with open source machinery and open source tools and farm mechanization and things like that is just right parallel along with that same line about not having a person, one central entity or one central person telling everybody what to do, what to think, what to buy, what to wear, that kind of thing. And
Yeah, and just what an experience that I think Bitcoiners have, and that more people are going to share because of open hardware, is not when you don't rely on the system as it is, the mainstream system, you can really disconnect yourself from a lot of the control systems that exist there. It's really a liberating experience. So, I mean, if a farmer can both produce crops, sell them in the marketplace for a currency, take that currency and then use it to buy local hardware, like local machinery, like really fulfill their needs, you know, fulfill their needs for like the things that right now they're buying with Federal Reserve notes. If they can do that in a more local setting, using local currencies, using Bitcoin, then all of a sudden they kind of they fade away from the government or kind of the establishment's matrix of control. It's like because if I'm not using dollars and I'm not writing if I'm not using dollars and I'm not writing conventional legal contracts, like what and I'm not hurting anyone, what role does government have for coming to my farm, coming to my store, and telling me anything about what it is that I need to do? And I think what we're gonna see, out of the Free State Project is going to be like one test ground for this. There's this is going to happen everywhere as open hardware and software kind of matures. Are really sophisticated economies being able to remove themselves from the mainstream economy, create an abundance of production for themselves, and then have that production kind of spread to other people who are still in the mainstream, and that's going to be it's going to be gifted. That we're going to watch a gifting revolution take place where people are going to say like, listen, like our school system doesn't need this horrible piece of software that you're paying $70,000 for. Like we could use a Drupal system. It's free right over here. These guys have gifted it to us. Like I'll put in some hours to configure it, and all of a sudden, like our school system is not on the proprietary, grid. Our school system's an open source system, and then that opens up the conversation for, well, what education materials are out there? Like what are we teaching our kids? Like, can we look at Wikipedia? Like, are there more educational resources out there, that are free and available that we could be using to, educate ourselves? And what we're going to see this free option kind of sweep away, because an opt-in option kind of sweep away all of these old systems that seem so entrenched that they could never be changed. Because and That's what open source is. Open source is like, please use my stuff. It's free. I've contributed it. Take it or leave it. And that's a state of abundance, and that's what's we're gonna watch that.
And how do you think that the current economic state is going to help that along? Because the way I see it is that whatever economic policies that Washington has implemented, they aren't working at all.
No.
And
Well,
Ben Bernanke just made a speech this morning and said, "Nah, you know what? The Federal Reserve is done doing regulation for now, but I really think we're going to pass the buck over to Congress, and Congress has got to do something about it." That's basically what he said. So, how do you think that this economic slide into, I mean, what I think is going to be another depression? How do you think that will impact people's views on centralization and?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm in New York. New York's really liberal. You know, I've been talking about Ron Paul for years here, and people have been like, "Devin, you're crazy." You know, like this doesn't make it doesn't make any sense. I haven't found anyone now who says that to me anymore, and it's not just because I mean I'm relatively convincing, but the world is realizing that war is not worth fighting for.
Yeah.
Like, no one is happy with Obama. I don't know anyone who's happy with the current system as it is. Even the people who are benefiting financially from it now aren't happy about it because they hear about peak oil and they think, oh, shit, like that will ruin my day. You know? So everyone, I think we're watching, with absolutely no help from the mainstream media, we're watching the American people, a new consensus emerge around just a few basic set of, basic ideas, which is that, government, society should be more open, especially government, and that we should really focus on creating wealth locally and regionally, and that and that it's a security issue, it's an economy issue, it's a healthcare issue. I mean, it's all of these issues wrapped into, a new consensus about like how we can operate a decent society, designed on thinking about the fact that we have this information network now. We have an abundance of software and information networks that we can use to communicate. Like, why do we still have a Federal Reserve System that was designed, whether it was good or bad, designed for industrialization? It was designed for the industrial era, and we are out of the industrial era, and it's very evident to everyone. And now, of course, the systems that grew up around that are going to have to change.
And I think that people will be forced into that type of change at some point. I mean, when gas goes to $20 a gallon and a supply line collapses, then all of a sudden people are going to go to the grocery store. There's not going to be any food, or yesterday I went to go. I mean, I have a bunch of water and food stocked up here, but I thought, there's a hurricane coming. It might be a good idea to just go stock up on some water. And I went to the shelves at Waldbaum's, and then also Duane Reade right after that, grocery store and a pharmacy, and just there was almost no water available. There was those little, Poland Spring.
Yep. Right, and they want to frack, right? So and their solution to all of this is let's frack. Let's make it so that there's less water available to people. The fracking issue gets me really upset because
I don't really know a lot about that. Do you want to explain that?
Fracking is basically the idea that there's natural gas in the rock layer that sits below the water table, so that there's natural gas embedded in the rocks under the water. The natural water that cycles through our bioregion, our environment, and that what we should do is we should drill a hole, we should drill a pipe, and drill down into that rock, blow it up, break it with high pressure water, so that we can get the natural gas out, and it'll be okay because it'll be really deep down, and we'll make sure that the pipe around this well will be sealed so that all of the disgusting chemicals that we're going to be pumping into the earth don't touch the water table.
I can't see anything that would ever go wrong with that. I don't know.
Yeah, right? No, of course not. The oil and gas industry is so good at pipes.
And that's something they would probably never get funding for if it weren't for government permissions, right?
Yeah, and then people say, well, how would Ron Paul, oh no, they're afraid that the EPA is going to disappear. What is the EPA doing about what's happened in Pennsylvania or Wyoming when it comes to fracking? They haven't done anything because there's nothing worse than a regulatory body that's owned by the industry that they're going to regulate. That is the biggest problem, and that is what's happened over and over again.
It's a conflict of interest of
Yeah,
grand proportions.
So we're looking at a world where, if peak oil arrives, and I think peak oil will arrive, and it can arrive in a variety of different ways, and it can, different intensities, but there's no doubt that water is going to be extremely, extremely important in the future. I mean, it's what life is built on, and they're telling me that they want to destroy water supplies in New York State. They've been doing it in Pennsylvania. They've been doing it out in Wyoming. They want to destroy our water supply for how much natural gas? Who cares? It doesn't matter how much natural gas there is, quite frankly. And I've heard that the amount of natural gas is also tiny, and it's hardly even profitable. But we're in the economy, and the way that the currency system works makes these absolutely abhorrent, unnatural economic transactions possible, because the only people who have access to capital is this elite group of corporations and accountant lawyers.
Well, not just the only people who have access to capital, but the only people who have access to a seat at the lobbying table with government, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's all. Anyway, yeah.
The way I think it works is they pay 20 or 30 grand or something like that to have a seat at the table with these local legislators and these local politicians and governing officials, and basically they say, hey, look, this is what we want to do. Let us do it. And
yeah.
This
Who else is here? We're at the same
where
party.
your money comes from. Look at all this tax revenue you're going to get from this natural gas fracking. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the only reason why these kind of things are approved. I mean, if there wasn't a government, or we had some kind of third-party environmental regulatory agency, this type of thing would probably never even be thought of, because the risks are just
laws,
too big.
I mean, there's a lot of ways to make this type of activity not possible. But I think the what comes out of what the liberty community is talking about, what is basically that the federal government should be very small, and we need to downsize the federal government a lot. But the other thing we have to do is we have to all get involved in state politics and local politics, and that forget. I was at CPAC this year, and the main message from the liberty community there was get and become a state senator, become a state rep. Like, we need everyone who's got any type of intellectual capability, who wants to serve their community and their country, to get involved in local politics. It doesn't mean one has to run for state representative, but one at least has to create trade networks that are off-grid trade networks, help their community members get resilient, so that they don't have to depend on other governments and corporations and whatnot. And if you have an interest in politics, get involved, run for local office, run for sheriff, run for county commissioner, and do it, because the states are supposed to be our defense against the ever-growing federal government. And we have a whole generation or two of politicians who just are not interested in doing what's right for the community, who are career politicians. And
I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm kind of an apathetic voter. I like Ron Paul, but I'm not. I can't justify voting for anybody, really.
There's a lot of people who agree. I respect that position.
But if you do think that the problems could be solved through legislative action, I mean, what would you do if you were president tomorrow? What would you do to kind of solve these problems?
I mean, that'd be a few things. I mean, auditing the Fed and getting on the road to ending the Fed, definitely good. I mean, I think the president's got the power to tell people. Well, first of all, I also have a directive to all federal agencies to any technology development should be open sourced. All the code needs to get out there. We need to be running systems off Linux and whatnot. Yeah. So I mean, the president should be explaining to the American people right now that there's this tremendous amount of free technology that we can use to build schools, build hospitals, improve our schools, improve our hospitals, run better, more effective police forces.
And it's all completely voluntary, right? The open source.
Everything's voluntary. That's
network.
Open source is.
That's what's beautiful about it, is that you could argue that, oh well, these corporations are investing all this money into this, and therefore they have a right to these patents. And yeah, that's true, but at the same time, probably the same thing or similar innovations can be possible with just a couple, really smart people donating just a little bit of time and energy to a project.
And 9 times, maybe not 9 times out of the 10, but a lot of the time, these patents that they have are just patented open source projects that other people have done the work on. I mean, the idea that, think about how the radio, people came up with the wireless transmission of radio waves, wireless transmission of information. 3 different people came up with that. Within like the same year. In the late 1800s, or like the telephone. It was Alexander Bell and Marconi and there's some other person who all came. They were basically all ran to the patent office within 2 or 3 days of each other because no one no technology lives on an island. Everything is built on the work of other people and other technologies that were released. So this idea that someone should have exclusive control over this massive technology infrastructure that results in an iPhone or something, or these patents, is pretty ludicrous. But I'm not against the patent system. I'm not against. I think property rights are really important. I think that even intellectual property is fine. If that's the way things are, I don't need to argue against that. What we just need to argue for is more people contributing their innovations to the open source community, because it's already happening. And I've been trying to find a graph, some type of visualization that expresses how much more activity is taking place in open source development than in proprietary development, and how in the future, because open source development is really an integration game often, where if you look at Drupal or Linux or any or the Global Village construction set, which is the open source ecology project, which is the tractors and all that stuff, it's individuals and small groups creating components that integrate into other components and cores and technology cores, and that there's now thousands of components that can integrate into the Drupal core to give you this massive amount of functionality. And every time someone contributes another component, the entire system, opportunities arise for the entire system that did not happen before. So really, we don't see these incremental steps forward in terms of what our capabilities are, but really these great leaps as new integrations are made possible. So it's not the rate at which open source, the opportunities for using open source technologies to do stuff is just happening so quickly. Because imagine what a Drupal component that does Bitcoin wallets and Bitcoin banking. You can imagine that once a component like that happens, you can combine the power of Bitcoin and the power of the Drupal content management system and the entire network of Drupal components. You can combine those two things together. The amount of opportunities becomes. It explodes. It's not an incremental step. It's a great leap, right. And that we're seeing that over the next few years. We're seeing that happening, with hardware and software, and on a really grand scale. And it's not being talked about, but often, and it really should be. And it's exciting because what it's going to allow us to do is become producers again. Really do the 3D printer dream, live the 3D printer dream, live the dream of being able to maintain our own heavy machinery, within a network of friends, within a community, and our own food and all, and really have real relationships with all of the different parts of our economy that we use, and achieve the dream of a coercion-free supply chain for all of our products, which is what gets me really excited. I want to know everyone who contributed to making my shirt. That's cool. That's
right.
Not cool.
And I think in the long run, it's more profitable in that way if you're appealing, if it goes directly from the innovator to the consumer. I mean, let's say you're working at Apple and you invent the touch screen or something like that, then I mean, you're gonna get paid by Apple, but it's still a centralized control, and most of that profit from that is going to go to Apple. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
Um,
I mean that's what.
just one example. I mean, of many.
But we're, you know, yeah, that's no one invented the touchscreen. This is the
Right.
touchscreen
Right.
is thousands and thousands and thousands of people and thousands of patents and innovations that lead us to multi-touch. Uh, so when we can start looking at technology as something that we can really customize to our needs, and I can go, and we have friends, or maybe it's me, maybe it's you, maybe it's someone else, who can go to their friends and say, like, listen, like, you like to, you like to design whatever gardens, or like you have, whatever your hobby is, like, how can I, and I can think, how can I let my uh, skills in deploying touchscreens, customized touchscreen like environments, help my friends to make their music or to do whatever. We're going to see, uh, we're going to get to this. We're going to get to something that feels like the future. Like right now, we have these technologies, but I don't think people feel like we're still like embedded within this coercive ecosystem, of politics, economics, and whatnot. But we are going to be achieving the voluntarist dream, and I think that that's something that very, very, very few people can argue it isn't awesome. That we're going to be able to have a lot less coercion in our society because of
I think that's awesome.
sorts. Yeah, it's great. It's
For
really
sure.
great. So
Well, it sounds like you have company. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Is there anything else you wanted to say in closing? Any website that you have that people can find out more information about you or about open source ecology
yeah,
or
so
that
I
kind
mean,
of
I
thing?
work with the Serapis Foundation. I mean, I started the organization. It's a nonprofit that supports this type of activity. We're going to have a new site up in the next month, so you can go to the old site, but
Okay.
serapisfoundation.org. But if people want to kind of get on the kind of start going through the rabbit hole of the open source revolution and its implications, I really suggest Marcin Jakubowski's Open Source Ecology TED Talk, and just the Open Source Ecology Global Village Construction Set uh, online presence of both of those things. And
Okay.
that's out of a farm in Missouri called Factory E Farm, and they're building the designs for they're building and then documenting how they built with the designs and all that. The 50 tools that people need to create civilization, on like a piece of land using, with like the inputs being scrap metal and, just like very, very basic inputs. The dream being that, once this set of designs are complete, uh, for people at least in that bioregion, in that, in the Missouri area, because these tools are designed, everything's location specific, people will be able, a team of a half dozen people who have basic fabrication skills and who like study up could go out to a plot of land with like $20,000 or less and just start being like building a civilization and not stopping until like
It's so
they
close, right?
yeah, it's
We're
close,
so
but it
close to
requires
not being dependent on any kind of masters, any kind of central bankers, any kind of politician. We're so close to it, and it's kind of
yeah, I mean,
frustrating at
and people
times.
are doing it in eco villages and whatnot, but we haven't seen the network. We've seen it happen on in silos, but what we're about to see is what happens when all those silos form a network, and and then the amount of innovation that's going to take place is going to. I have no doubt we're going to be out in space, on the open source technology stack and not the proprietary technology stack, because the rate of innovation is just so much faster. I mean, how are you going to tell? IBM can have 100,000 engineers, but there's 7 billion people in the world. I mean, we've still got, and India is hanging out with 300 million people who are kind of in like America level of standard of living,
Yeah.
and 700 million people who are in a village setting. All of these people are going to be on the internet. They're all going to be speaking. Most of them are going to be speaking English, and they're I'm really excited about India, basically, and they're already doing all this stuff. I mean, I have no doubt that all of these like innovations that we need to be completely off grid, and like the global village construction set type stuff. A lot of this stuff already exists in India, and hasn't been documented and placed in front of us in a really easily accessible way, so that we can be using it to do our own thing here. But it's very, I mean, I'm very optimistic about the what's about to take place, and I also am constantly reminded that the media has no interest, the mainstream has no interest in making us excited and optimistic about like the potential abundance of like using open source technology to make like an awesome future. Like they have every incentive for us to be afraid and to just like continue to consume mindlessly in like in like a not particularly passionate way. So I think things are looking up. Yeah, that's that. If we could sign off on that, I'd be.
Yeah, cool. And if you could just email me those links so that I can.
Yeah,
I can
I'll email
post
you a
them
bunch
in
of
the
stuff. In
video
fact, I've
description.
got.
You can take a look.
Yeah, and we're also I'm beginning to write at the Revolut Times, revolutimes.com.
Okay, send that link and I'll
be,
put it down there.
I should
Definitely.
be following it. Yeah, and this is great. I mean, creating content is the most important thing that we need to all be doing.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about freedom, people, we have the internet now.
Yeah, exactly.
Get out there and start talking about things that you're passionate about.
Yeah. Can you imagine what someone from like 1890 or 1920 or even 1950 would say if they saw all these tools? They'd be DJing all the time. That even if they were
like,
bad,
why are you watching Fred on YouTube?
Yeah, they'd be freaking out. So yeah, I think it's really important that we're all like super excited about using this stuff to spread the word. So it's great. It's great work you're doing.
Well, Devin, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Likewise.
It ended up being more of a philosophical conversation than a technical one, which I don't mind. I like that kind of stuff. But I really appreciate you taking the time and letting people know about this, because like I said, it's the first time I've ever heard about it. Very interesting to me, and it's kind of right in line with my philosophies on money and economics and things like that, politics.
Yeah, very exciting. If you want technical, opensourceecology.org, you will have your fill many lifetimes of technical challenge over there.
And then there's forums and everything on there, I saw.
Yeah, there's some forums, but the wiki, just getting into that wiki is really fun. Appropedia.org is also good. I'll send you a bunch of links.
Okay. Well, do not get blown away in the hurricane tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll try not to.
And hopefully you and I here in New York City will live to speak another day.
Awesome.
Take care.
Peace. Thanks.